Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Between Two Chairs. My name is Fernando Arencibia Jr., and with me, as always, is the research-in-chief, Jennifer Woolman. Jennifer, say hi.
Hello, everybody.
You like that one, huh? You like that one? That was pretty good.
I'm going to have to research how to say research-in-chief in other languages or hello in other languages. Or I'll have to research something.
I love it. No, listen, we are at the time of the year where, there's a lot of outlook conferences. There's a lot of looking into the crystal ball to find out what the year is going to look like. And there's also a lot of other important events that are happening around the industry here in the state of Florida and in South Florida. And so we thought we'd kind of combine the two and have a little bit of conversation about them. And one of the events that we attend every year is the CCIM Outlook Conference for the Miami-Dade Monroe chapter of CCIM Florida, which is always very well attended. And it's usually filled with, a lot of great, impactful information for the market and for the year. And, I wanted to pick your brain, Jennifer, about, what it is that you saw at the CCIM Outlook Conference that maybe caught your eye. I know that we had a presentation from the chief economist of Moody's, who kind of, gave us a lay of the land of the industry. And then we had presentations about the different outlooks on the different market segments or the different asset classes in commercial real estate. We had a great panel on growth and development, where we had the mayor of South Miami, we had the chief of development for Miami Freedom Park, and we have Michael Berkowitz with the Berkowitz Development Group. That was really interesting. And then there was a fire chat with Mike Papas that was moderated by Tony Puente, who's a friend of the podcast. So, I don't know how you wanted to break this down one at a time, or
let's just kind of start with key takeaways from a macro overview, right?
Yeah.
So Jeffrey Havsey, who is the economist with Moody's Analytics, he said a couple of things that stuck out, and I actually quoted. One is that something that we've already seen locally and within our own business is that 2026 should be better than 2025. Yeah. But there's still some crosswinds in the economy that are probably going to keep the reins on it from getting too crazy or out of control, but definitely way more positive. And then one of the quotes that I love that he said is that mixed urban is a trend. It's not trendy. And so I love that because that showed up in some of the conversations we've had earlier with our interview of MJ Green, right, where we were talking specifically about the Bright Line and the food hall in there. And to me, that was a prime example of mixed urban. Yeah. Right? Because in the past, they would have designed a food hall, and I think they actually did, that was more for the ridership, and it didn't do well. But now they've really curated, like they took some time, they took a big pause, and they thought, okay, who are we going to bring here to bring people other than riders here and to make it a better experience for our ridership? So instead of maybe having chains that you can find anywhere, they were way more specific and intentional, and they brought an amazing taco place with some of the best tacos actually in downtown Miami there. So to me, that mixed urban and trying to use spaces for more than one thing. In this case, it's space more than just for the transit the person going to or from somewhere. It's for the residents who live in the building, the workers who work in the immediate area, et cetera. And I think we're starting to see more of that trend overall in Miami, which for me is great because Miami went through such a huge building boom, and it was kind of like, let's just build what we think needs to go here, or we don't have enough condos, let's build condos, or we don't have enough hotels, or our hotels are old, let's build hotels, right? And now we're thinking, and the owners of these properties and the Downtown Development Authority and other government officials are thinking, okay, now how do we make that space more usable, more friendly for everybody, that not only the people who are using that space for its original purpose, let's say a hotel or an office or a train station, but for the whole for the community as a whole, tourism, tourists, residents, and workers alike. So that really resonated with me, as did his comment about the 15-minute city, which is growing in popularity. And obviously Miami has been a 15-minute city for probably close to a decade.
Yeah, and he also made a comment about industrial that was not popular, and I don't mean popular like in that people didn't like it. It's more like people disagreed with his assessment that there was going to be almost like a bubble in the industrial sector, which I found I also disagreed with. I mean, I think that's very hyper local, and I think that when we look at the just supply and demand of industrial in South Florida, I don't see what he was mentioning in that regard.
Especially the demand, because so our supply is shrinking because our land is so high priced. We're sandwiched between the Everglades and the ocean, right? So industrial space typically had been, or industrial land, I should say, typically had been the lower priced land, not anymore. But with the Live Local Act and everything, a lot of the projects that are being built are also looking at changing industrial properties into mixed use residential properties. So I disagreed with him too. He made the comment that I did think was interesting, and I think this is more on a national level and probably for areas that aren't constrained by land issues. And he said that industrial needs to start talking in cubic feet instead of square feet to take into account the ceiling height, modern racking systems, etc., due to functional obsolescence in the older product. But what we're seeing, not only in our what our agents are looking for, what our clients are looking for, and what Miami desperately needs, are those what he considered functionally obsolete, low ceiling, multi-bay, small.
It's just that we've seen so much of that convert into other uses. We've seen it in retail. We've seen it as entertainment places. We've seen it as medical. I mean, it's so for us, it's really not it's really not a thing of the functional obsolescence of it is questionable. Just because there are so many different uses, is such a convertible product, in my view. So that was really interesting. And then we had that presentation, which I thought was really cool, that we got to see some of the renderings of what's happening at the Miami Freedom Park, that is hosting the new stadium for the MLS Miami, FC Miami team that won the cup last year. So this is going to be really interesting to have a team that, won the MLS Cup, and the following year is opening their new season to celebrate their win and to start a new season in a brand new stadium. But also really, the dynamics of what they're doing in that park is impressive.
And the fact that we see it all the time. I mean, I drive by there all the time, and that stadium seems to have gone up on that golf course in the blink of an eye. It's going to open in April, on April 4th.
Exactly.
Yeah, Fraser Reid, who's the senior real estate development executive for that park, had an amazing presentation, just the vision, how, again, going back to what Terry had said, or sorry, not Terry, but what Jeffrey had said about mixed urban is a trend and not trendy, is this isn't going to be just a sports arena, right? It's not going to be just a stadium with a hotel and all this stuff to support Inter Miami, right? It's also going to be a venue for locals. There's a huge park that is being built for the community. This stadium is going up in phases. There's going to be, a huge retail and entertainment segment that will be completed by the end of this year to bring in not only people who might be attending games, but maybe people who don't attend the games but still want to be a part of the experience, or to bring in the community on days when there aren't games to experience some of the tenants and the events that they're going to be having there. So I thought that was super interesting. It's going to add a lot of square footage of retail. I think traffic is going to be an interesting challenge there, since it is on the feedway to the Miami International Airport. So.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I did have a private conversation with Terry after the fact that, I was able to. I was asking him that. What are your concerns? You live here in the city. You travel as well. Obviously, you're probably not going to travel on days where they're playing, and and he spoke about the way that they have configured it to try to minimize the impact of that traffic as you're going on your way to the airport. And of course, he spoke about it also depends on where people are coming from, because there is that orange line that takes you from downtown straight to the airport. There are ways for you to do it where you don't even have to worry about any of those things. But then he also mentioned something which is true. It's only 17 games, right? The season is 34 games. It's not a venue that is as large as a football stadium where you're going to have 80,000
Right, I think it's only people. Like 20-something thousand square feet. It's under 30,000, seats, not square feet. Right, 30,000
under 30,000 seats, and you have 17 games. Most of them are Saturday and Sunday at night. So it's interesting. I mean, they have some Wednesday games and stuff like that. But it's in the grand scheme of things, right? It's not something that is going to be too crazy. On the flip side, so think about that you're building this stadium for 17 games a year, but you have this, incredible park that you're building where there's going to be nightlife, there's going to be, a lot of opportunity, office buildings, or, so really, it's going to be really interesting how that whole thing gets activated. I'm always going to miss that golf course, because I thought for a public course, it was one of the most beautiful and, well-kept courses, and I know a lot of people already miss it. It's going to be really interesting how they're doing that. And there is a youth golf course thing that they're building. And then, of course, all of the youth sport part that has to do with football, soccer. So that was really interesting. And I thought the conversation between Michael Berkowitz and Fernandez were really interesting. One of the things that I really enjoyed about one comment that Berkowitz spoke about is that he spoke about the operator for Apocalypse Barbecue. Yeah. And I really thought it was really interesting how he says, so we've had this center forever. And for a long time, people would mention that Bahama Breeze was there. And then there was a place a long time ago there that was called Gatsby's that also became, very popular. You have the movie theater, you have all these different things, but that now it's become like the Apocalypse, because they took over the diner
for the barbecue.
Yeah. Exactly. But then he spoke about how then they partnered on another shopping center that the Berkowitz group owns, and now another concept from Apocalypse Now, which is Lola's, burgers, are in that place. And so, I thought again that speaks to, and you and I have seen this repeatedly, when operators of shopping centers have that level of curation mindset and expand, relationship with their tenants and the tenant base that they want to bring in, man, they deserve all the success they get because it makes sense, right? Exactly. Right. So I thought that was really cool. And then, of course,
he talked about Dadeland Station and redoing that, which is super interesting. The kind of change that's gone through, right? That started with Bed Bath & Beyond leaving, and then Dick's Sports came in to a space that used to be, God, it's changed so much I can't even remember, but Dick's Sports was there for a while until they went to Dadeland. Right. And now, so he had to do that space space, so they brought a Marshalls in. So seeing how that shopping center is also changing was super, super interesting. And then the fact that here's this family office that has always, since inception, been focused on retail, and now they're getting into their first industrial endeavor because they felt like, they already have a significant pocket and, a good portfolio of retail. And we all know how difficult it is to get into retail right now, but they are a family office and they continue to grow a portfolio. So where to go next? And they felt like a logical place was industrial, right? Yeah. So they're doing a big development down in Homestead.
Now, in this segment, not to kind of go too deep into it, but in this segment that had to do with, market segment outlook, when they're looking at different asset classes, it seemed to me that there was, adding to the point that we made earlier about how 2026 we're expecting to be better than 2025, there seemed to be optimism by all asset class.
Well, and I think one of the quotes where I quoted him, I quoted Michael Berkowitz, because he said this over and over, is like, with so much enthusiasm, was, what an amazing time to live in Miami, right? Like, seriously, with everything that's going on from a sports perspective, from an economic perspective, from development perspective, across the board, it is just such an exciting time to live here. And I think the market segment outlook kind of showed kind of a cautious, analysis of what's happened after COVID and how things have slowed down and moderated a bit. But we continue to be like the bright spot from a national perspective in terms of job growth, in terms of the amount of money coming here, in terms of new projects being built. I mean, we still are the number one for number of hotel rooms being built in the country. We still, the multifamily that was built over the last several years, et cetera, and the number of luxury projects that we have underway. I think that optimism was shown kind of across the board. We had Carrie Fraser from Franklin Street, and she's the one who gave the retail outlook, and she was saying that retail is still on a tear nationwide, and that necessity retail is what's probably going to outperform every other retail. That the NOI trend in retail has continued to go up, even as rents and insurance and the costs have gone up. And she said that our top market are in Miami. The key retail markets are Brickell, Wynwood, and Coral Gables. But the notable growth areas, which we've seen over the last several years with the Grass River redo of Coconut Grove's downtown, was Coconut Grove, and now South Miami is an emerging market because of the soon-to-be torn down and rebuilt location. That's the Shops of Sunset Place, and some of the other residential buildings that are mixed use with retail on the bottom going into South Miami. She said that interestingly, Barnes & Noble, which was kind of on the brink several years ago, has been doing extremely well. Yeah. They're notable people to look at in terms of they're growing their number of retail outlets, and having been to several of them recently for Christmas shopping, again, what they're doing to engage the community with kid hours and games and cafes and book clubs and everything else is pretty impressive. I think they're doing a really good job trying to bring in people other than somebody who's going to buy a book. And again, engaging and using their space. And then there was obviously Trader Joe's, Ulta, and a company called Miniso. The Nationals have always loved Florida, but business tax was always an issue for them because they had seen other places, and now without the business rent tax gone, the conversations for renting with Nationals are a lot better. And the Miami market rents are close to double national rents.
Wow.
So I thought that was super interesting. The year-over-year increase in rents is decreasing from the double digits during the pandemic, but they're still they're still increasing. They're still trending upward. Yeah,
for sure.
So that was her outlook, which was really good. Then Grant Killingsworth, he's senior vice president of CBRE. He did a quick update on the office market. He said we have 200 million square feet of office from Homestead to PGA Boulevard, and from 2020 to today, over 10% of the overall market in new leases is for companies that are capital tech or law, and that several of these moved during COVID, and post-COVID they're expanding.
Makes sense.
So that was his update, and then we got updates.
Eddie always gives some good data in regards to average square footage.
Yeah, he gave some Miami stats on industrial. Miami stats asking rent is about $20.77 a square foot industrial gross, whereas a year ago it was $20.40, so increasing but not as much. The average sale price has also increased from $275 a square foot from $258 a square foot a year ago, and that the total market value for industrial, Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade. So Palm Beach, we have 72,186,000 square feet with a 6.7% vacancy. Broward is 144 million square feet, 6.9 vacancy, and Miami-Dade 281,298,000 square feet with a 6.6 market vacancy, total market value of $79.5 billion.
And that's Eddie Vasquez with ComReal.
Right. Super knowledgeable.
Good guy,
Yeah,
done deals for him, with. And then we know Mitash.
Mitash. Kripalani, who also used to be a CCIM president with Cushman. He said nearly 77% of 33,000 square feet are being built within or immediately outside the urban core. So again, bringing us back to the urban core and the market being a trend and not trendy. So that was the theme that even though Jeffrey said it at the beginning, it seemed to really resonate throughout. Rents steadily increased from 2015 to 2020. Obviously, during 2021, forget steady, they shot up, and the growth has normalized. So rent levels have normalized, but they're continuing to grow at 1% to 2% per year. So significantly less than what they were before. Not a lot of new construction, some leftover construction with units still coming online that are still going to suppress the growth in the rents and multifamily, but it'll catch up eventually. It's steady.
And I think that's kind of the prevailing feeling among all asset classes and everybody who presented was that, things are steady, they're stabilized, there are sectors that are growing, and those that are growing even at a slower pace are still growing, and there's great opportunity. And we've spoken about the supply and demand question regarding industrial, that I thought that Jeffrey Havsey kind of threw a curveball there just to get everybody walking up. Exactly. So that was his version of a cafecito.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit. I didn't go to GARD this year, which is Great American Realtor Days, which is our legislative lobbying time with Florida realtors. And for those of you who don't live in Florida or who don't know how our quirky system works, because it's an election year, our legislative session actually started in January. It only goes for 60 days, so it's a very short sprint. Usually legislation starts in March. So, we were there the first week or second week that legislation opened. So tell me a little bit what you saw, what the sentiment is in Tallahassee.
No, I think certainly just to give you some broad strokes, great energy. 1,000 realtors descend upon Tallahassee every year to advocate for our clients and the issues that are important to them and those that we serve, and really that is the gist of what we do. I thought that there was great energy from everybody, even though we're starting so early in the year. I think generally what people expect is, from what people have spoken, over the last couple of weeks, it is a 60-day session, and it's likely that there is it could go a little longer. Last year it went 100+ days to get a balanced budget. One of the things that happens with the Florida Constitution is is that really the constitutional requirement of the legislature is to pass.
The only one.
Is to pass, right? Is to pass a budget.
Yeah.
You know. However, you usually get 3,000 to 4,000 bills that are filed, and out of those, maybe 200 of them actually make it into the desk of the governors. And of course, a big part of the conversation has been about property taxes, because it's something that the governor spoke about last year. And the way our system works is that any changes in property taxes has to go in front of the voters, and it has to pass by 60% of the voters. And so what they're having a conversation about is, what are they proposing? And there's about 4 bills that are making their way through the different committees, and to see if they come to a consensus about what they want to propose for the voters to decide through a referendum ballot in our November elections. So I think what everybody is expecting, even though they want to get their work done and go campaigning because it is an election year, there's likely to be 2 additional special sessions, one that has to do with redistricting, which other states are having those conversations, and then the other one that has to do with property taxes. So nothing has been announced per se, but that's kind of the idea. And
with the property tax issues, all of this comes up with the key word for the last several years, which has been affordability across the board.
Right.
And it's affordability for everything, right? For businesses, for renters, for owners, for buyers, etc. So this proposal was to try to attack affordability and provide some relief. And I just want to caution everybody, because I see on Instagram and I hear all these things. Oh, great, we're not going to have any property taxes, and they're going to get rid of all property taxes. Well, no, that's not what's being discussed. And I just want to caution people that the money's got to come from somewhere. We are a no income tax state, so 100% of our revenue comes from tourist taxes, property taxes, or sales taxes.
Yeah.
So
we'll see what's being proposed and see where it is. I mean, it's a healthy conversation to be had for sure, and from the get-go, number one, they're talking about non-school taxes, right?
Taxes, and the municipalities can't affect any fire or police first responder type.
Right, that it cannot negatively
impact those budget items, which are some of the largest budget items. So interesting conversation to have for sure. Just don't want people going crazy thinking that they're going to eliminate all of their property taxes.
No. I would tell you. Look, it's part of having a healthy conversation. Let's see where it goes, and we're monitoring that. And I think that over the years, there's been a lot of great work that has been done by the legislature in regards to the removal of the business rent tax, for example, the enactment of the Live Local Act, which is really having a positive effect throughout the state. And really, our efforts this year are about protecting and preserving all of that hard work that it took to get those things moving in the right direction. One of the things that has already happened in Dade County, I think we've led the way, has been about the establishment of ADUs. So there is
accessory dwelling
units, correct. Something that you could, such as backyard cottages or garage apartments that you could build to create more affordable housing. It could be multi-generational housing. And so that was one of the things, support for the Hometown Heroes housing program, which, basically it is a program that was started a few years back and helps teachers, nurses, firefighters, critical workforce personnel afford homes in their communities. And that's kind of the idea. And, so it's asking them to expand funding because it's proven to be very, very impactful. And my understanding is that it was always created to be a self-sustaining thing. And
because they pay it back,
right. And I understand that there's already $30 million that have gone back into it. So it's been really interesting. And then, of course, continue to monitor the effectiveness of the Live Local Act. And there are a few tweaks that are coming down the pike there as well that are making their way through the committees. Of course, it's very early to really definitively say, what's going to make it out of those committees and all that other stuff. So, I think we've always advocated for, programs like Myself Florida condo programs that deal with hardening the homes for major events like hurricanes and flooding and things of that nature. And monitoring the effectiveness of the ongoing, property insurance reforms. I think that has been incredibly impactful. We got 17 new companies that have come into the marketplace. A lot of people are already out of Citizens. I'm out of Citizens already, and
yeah, I've been out.
So you've been out as well, right? And so so it's really been an interesting dynamic. And so I would say it's just one of those things where very early in the game to see where things are going. But I think the important conversations are being had about all these factors. All right.
That's all.
And so I'll tell you. One of the most important things that we do as brokers in commercial, and really it should be universal for anyone in real estate, is to stay plugged in, and that's important. And you notice that staying plugged in at a state level, but also staying plugged in at a hyper local level and knowing your market is of incredibly importance, and having those connections to know that if you don't have the answer, you know where to find it, right? And those things are impactful and important. That's why we love to highlight some of these events and some of these Outlook conferences to not only give you a lay of the land of where things are today when you're listening to this, but also to encourage you to attend some of these events because they are impactful to your industry and your business. And I promise you that they will make you a better professional. And if you're an investor, if you are in the development side of the business, I would tell you that those events are also for you because they do impact your goals.
Well, and not just learning, but sharing your stories. So if you're seeing issues in your marketplace, or if you're consistently having the same issue over and over, or you can't close a deal, or a client who was thinking of moving here doesn't move here because of XYZ, those stories are extremely important that you share with the legislators, whether they're, state legislators or local government officials, because that's how we get things changed and create more efficiencies in our market and help our clients. I can think off the bat, the business rent tax was something that we initiated through Miami Realtors Commercial Board. Same thing with the permitting and getting rid of expired permits that don't affect health and life safety. Those things came out because somebody told their stories of how it was impacting their deals. So always remember, if you're experiencing it, so is somebody else, or if they haven't yet, they will. And it's great to be able to affect that kind of change because the legislatures and most government officials really are there to try to help change things for the better.
Absolutely. And to that end, we really appreciate you listening in to our Between Two Chairs podcast. Please remember, we also have a YouTube channel. We put up all of our interviews, which are videotaped in there. We got a lot of great interviews set up for the year. Very exciting, and it is very cool to see it in video. But however you listen to our podcast, we are incredibly appreciative of that. And we hope you have an amazing and wonderful day. So without further ado,
Bye.
Bye.